One God, one religion.
Why are there so many religions? Why are there so many religions? If we understand by religion these outward forms and tenets and dogmas and customs, that does not take us to the real underlying universality of religion, which is true religion. Not the outward form of dogma and tenets and creeds and so forth. Those vary. But underneath these outward forms is the universality of religion, or the one God and one religion. That we must know about, that we must understand. And so this universality of religion means that true religion must be something that's universally necessary, something which we must be able to take with us in every action. Not only in every action, but in every thought or every phase of existence. God must be there. If it is that way, then we know the universal religion, we know the one God and the one religion. And so this universality of religion, or this one Father, when he is realized, when the one eternal Spirit is realized, then, and then only, no matter what the outward form of religion is, can he be universalized. It doesn't make any difference what path you have taken or are taking. There must be behind that one path or that particular path this underlying universal principle which can be applied to everybody, irrespective of color, race, or creed, or religion. That is the outward form of religion. In that, lies the universality of religion. Not something just to use on Sunday or on Wednesday or Thursday, but something that you can utilize and is necessary for you and for me and every one of us under every condition in every phase of existence. That's the one God. That's the universality of religion. That's the true religion. And so, getting beyond the outward form of religion, we must have something that's practical and pragmatically necessary, some aspect wherein all of us can meet, that is, wherein all forms of religion must meet. There is something in which we can, or a common ground upon which we can unite. That's necessary. If that could be understood, there'd be less trouble about the different forms of religion. The Baptists would go where the Methodists are, and the Methodists would go where the Baptists are, and the Catholics would go where the Protestants are, and so forth. If the universality of God's presence can be known and realized, that's the key point. That's the common ground upon which all must meet and will have to meet if they are to make God universally necessary and find the one God, the one religion. And so, the point is this: God is one. God is true, indivisible. And knowing that one, in him we can all meet on common ground. The one is not found only in Protestantism or Catholicism. God is far above that. God is the one indivisible truth from which all these other things have come. In him we find what we need, that which we can apply to our lives under every condition, under every circumstance. And so, the true purpose of religion is not to convert people to another allegiance, but to get them somehow to realize the presence of God, get them to realize his nearness. And then, in that nearness, they will find peace and bliss which everybody wants, nothing else. That's the universality which is necessary. That's the universal common ground, is the peace and bliss of God's presence, no matter what your outward form of religion is. That is what we must do, get people to realize it. But people are taken up with ideas of God and such things, and they miss the taste of his presence. Master used to say, you can talk about sugar, describe it, its crystalline form, and all sorts of forms of sugar, but until you taste it, you do not know sugar, so until you taste God, you do not know him. That's what we must have. Having that, there'll be one God and one religion. It's all right to have the various forms of religion. They're necessary. There are many paths leading to God, but the paths meet in one common principle, universal principle. That's the bliss of God's presence, the peace of his presence. And so, the Master has said this in his book. The Master said, didn't Christ tell us, not every one that saith unto me, Lord, 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 shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Now, to do God's will, we must know him. To do God's will, we must realize him. If I ask you to do something and you do not know me, how can you do my will? Or if you ask me to do something and I do not know you, how can I do what you want me to do? Same with God exactly, just as simple as that. If you know him, feel him, know his presence is with you, and are one with him, you can do his will, not until. Therefore, those who meditate and find the presence of God as peace and bliss, that positive thing which all of us need, they are the ones who can do God's will. They have realized him, and realizing him, they know that his peace and his bliss is inexhaustible. You cannot exhaust it. You cannot get enough of it. Ordinary pleasure depends upon fulfillment through an object of sense or such things, but the bliss of God is something positive. You cannot exhaust it, as I have said. Pleasure you can, because it's in outward consciousness. It's in the consciousness of time, and everything in time passes away. You may have a wonderful life and plenty of things to do with, but that you'll grow tired of that, because it's in outward consciousness. But the bliss of God, which is timeless, you will never grow tired of. You can never exhaust it. That's why people who meditate and form the habit and taste the sugar of God's presence, they can never exhaust it. And they are never satisfied. They never grow tired of meditation. Now, if you're growing tired of meditation, you're not deep enough in it yet. Those who really meditate and taste the presence of God, you cannot get enough of it. Because you can never tire of it, because it's in the timeless region of God's presence. It's a very significant metaphysical fact to remember. Even the best conditions on earth, I've seen people, you've seen them, with all the money they want and more, and all the lands and all the houses and everything, and they're sick. They're sick at heart because they must have that positive presence of God. That they cannot exhaust. That they will never tire of. Of course, we could all use a little of that wherewithal in this life, but we must not stop there. We must find that which satisfies us under all conditions, under every circumstance. And therefore, contacting God is necessary, and the way to do it is to always remember this one thing. God is ever conscious, blissful existence, nothing else. Think it over. Well, if I had $1,000, I'd have everything. No, you wouldn't, because that passes away, and your consciousness of it will pass away. But God is ever conscious, blissful, eternal existence. Patanjali, the great Patanjali, said, everybody needs and wants one thing, and that is to escape pain eternally. Oh, you say, if I had plenty of money, a little ache and pain wouldn't bother me. Yes, it would. But in God's presence, in his ever-conscious, blissful, eternal existence, no pain can exist. No disturbing consciousness can stay in his presence. Of any nature, no disturbing consciousness, distracting consciousness of any nature can say, because those who meditate have proved it. And I have proved it myself, and I know many of you here have proved it. If you have the power through practice and through the love of God to lift yourself up from outward consciousness in which pain exists, the pain will disappear, or any state of consciousness which you do not desire will disappear. Try it. Prove it, otherwise you're going to listen to someone say it all your life. Know it through realization. That will give you God's presence, and there'll be one religion, because nothing else will satisfy you. All forms melt into the one great love of God, His great bliss. All paradoxes of this outward consciousness and injustices melt in His great love and His bliss. They cannot exist there, because God is timeless, He's one, His consciousness is one. These other things are of dual nature, diversity, and are found in worldly consciousness. So when you can, just by practice and a real desire in your heart to know God, He can lift you so that you have the power to lift your consciousness to that place where no one can catch you with sorrow, sickness, or pain, or any undesirable state of consciousness. That's the power of God. That's the miracle of God's presence. Isn't that one God and one religion? What of it if you are a Methodist like I was? Almost said I am, like I was. What of it? I can be just as good a Methodist if I want to go there, if they invited me to go and see them. But I wouldn't forget that which is above Methodism. And that's the presence of God's bliss, His love. That's the reality. That's what we want. And those who meditate want. I know Reverend Raymond and I meditate out in the desert. And when we get to meditation, I think we forget everything except that peace and bliss of God's presence. That's it. That's what you must have. You won't lose, you'll gain everything in His presence. And so, as I have said, God is the ever-conscious, blissful, eternal existence. And as Patanjali said, it's universally necessary for everybody, because you can analyze every state of consciousness and it resolves into that you want to be rid of pain permanently. Not just physical pain. There's nothing worse than pain of the soul, where the ignorance of the soul keeps you from realizing your oneness with God, and so His words are truth. And that's what we must have, that's what we want. And so, if our conception of God is not followed by the realization of His presence, and in that realization of His presence, an inspiration that carries us through this life, if it is not followed by that, if it is not followed also by a universal necessity that He be with us in everything we do, then our religion is useless. When things are going along nicely, you say, oh, well, I'm getting along pretty well, and things are all right. But they won't always be that way, because it's so in outward consciousness. But if you can find God, and you have made Him so that He is universally necessary to every act of your life, then you've got religion. Then you've got something real. And when you can do anything, no matter how disagreeable it is, now think, when you can do anything, no matter how hard it is for you, or disagreeable, and feel God's love, you've got religion. And there's one God and one religion. Now that can be done. Master used to say, saints never lose their calmness. Never lose your calmness. Then he ended it by saying, through the crash of breaking worlds. If you have God, what is this dream? It's His dream. If He breaks it, if He removes it, what of it? We have Him, and He is peace and bliss, ever-conscious, eternal existence. That's what God is. That's what we can realize right here in this life. If we give a little effort and have a little faith in God, take Him at His word, or take Him through the words of His scriptures. O ye of little faith, nor be ye of doubtful mind. God is, and we can realize that. And so, what can give us this conception of God which is universally necessary? It isn't the following of ideas. No. To say that God is infinite, ever-present, all-pervading, all-loving, that won't satisfy us. We've got to realize Him in a tangible way, so that instead of saying God is wonderful, and we see injustices going on about us and paradoxes, we can feel His presence in spite of those things and know why those injustices are going on and those paradoxes are there. Now, when we can do that, then God becomes tangible and universally necessary. He is something real. We have realized what God is, not just talked about Him and listened to ideas. We've been listening to ideas of religion for a long time, for ages. Let's have something practical, something real, something tangible. That's what self-realization will give you, and all who follow it sincerely, it'll give you the ways and the means to make God tangible, and so tangible that he will be universally necessary to you. You can't do without him. You ask any people in this room, any of them who meditate regularly, tell them, well, why don't you stop meditation? Nothing doing, they'll say. That's my life. That's the presence of God within me. And so let us understand these important things, and also only realize that the element common to all religions can be universalized. That's the point. Many years ago, they started in Chicago in 1893 to bring all the religions together. They tried it, but they couldn't do it. They were trying to bring the outward forms together. They made a good start, but they couldn't quite get that universal necessity there, which is beyond the outward forms. And so when Master came in 1920, many years later, he gave us the ways and the means to do that, to make the presence of God a reality, to give the ways and the means where people can realize the presence of God, not just try to get the outward forms of religion together. Now, that's what you have. Those of you who wish to follow and do follow self-realization, you have the ways and the means to make one God knowable, realizable, and one religion your own, the true universal aspect of God's presence. Now, Master has said this. Without a question of a doubt, bliss consciousness is God's consciousness. And so when you, in your meditations, feel that consciousness of bliss coming in upon you, realize that's God's presence. Without a question of a doubt, he said, bliss consciousness is God's consciousness. There you have the key to making God a universal necessity. That bliss you will feel. And when you feel it, realize that it is God. Now that does not mean pleasure. Pleasure, as I told you, just simply means the satisfaction of a want through fulfillment by receiving an object of sense. No, God is the positive aspect of truth. It is truth itself, and his presence can be known and is characterized by the state of bliss, peace. That's why Jesus said, the peace that passes all understanding. That's what God is. That's what you get when you receive his word, as I will speak of in just a minute. That's the manifestation of God's consciousness. We cannot see consciousness. You cannot see my consciousness, but you can see the results of it operating as I speak and move around here. So with God, we cannot see his consciousness, but we can feel the manifestation of his consciousness as peace and bliss, and as light, and also the great cosmic sound. That is the Holy Ghost spoken of in the Bible, the Word spoken of in St. John. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. That's his first manifestation. That we can realize, but we cannot realize God as an idea, as an abstraction. God must be known as something tangible, and by that tangibility of his Word, we can know him. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's why Jesus spoke of it as the Comforter, because in that Word we find all the aspects of God's presence. Everything. His great light, the great sound of his energy moving, the cosmic energy, and greatest of all, his feeling. And his feeling is love. His feeling is peace and bliss. Therefore, contacting God as bliss fulfills all qualifications. That's why we read in the Hindu scriptures, Satchitananda, ever conscious, blissful, eternal existence. Don't you want that? I do. Don't you want to be free from those things which cause you trouble and distraction? God put us here in this mess, but he also gave us the ability to get out of it. And he should do that. How would he like it if he was here and had to go through all the things we go through? He wouldn't like it. Be on time and such things. No, but he gives us the way out. It's most wonderful. I don't know whether I can remember the story after getting so deep in this one God and one consciousness. I try and remember it, but I told you that habits die. Old habits die, and that habit of my being late is dead. Now back me up in this. And so this man was at the cemetery and he was crying. kneeling before the grave, and he said, "Why did you go? Why did you have to die? Why did you have to die?" The lady came up, "Dear sir," she says, "you lost your mother?" He said, "No." "You lost your brother?" "No." "Your sister?" "No." "Well, who was it?" "My wife's first husband." So you see, habits can die. Well, Master said, he said, when you speak, tell them a story or two. He says it's good. So that's why I do it. I don't know whether it's in order, but he used to. He founded Self-Realization Fellowship with all its wonderful aspects. If he can tell the story and he told me to do it, why can't I? As long as I pick the right story, that's the important thing. And so having disposed of that dead habit, we go on just a little more. Now, the proof of the existence of God lies right within ourselves. Remember Master's words? Without a question of a doubt, bliss consciousness is God's consciousness. That's one of the proofs that God exists. The other is this, the vision of light which comes. The vision of light which comes. And when that glorious vision of God's omnipresence comes, and you feel the bliss with it, they're all one. When that comes, all injustices and paradoxes melt into that. That's the most wonderful thing. How does it seem possible when this diversity of this outward consciousness seems so complex, so deep, and there's so much lack of understanding? It is because of the miracle of God. In His great bliss, everything melts. Everything is understood. All fulfillment is there. Everything is in God's presence. That's why there should be one God and one religion. Now, going on just a bit, as I have said, God can be realized by all through the contacting or the realization of His first manifestation. In the beginning, God said, "Let there be light." And from that light, all things have come. But in that vibration of light is His peace and His bliss. So there you have the key. All can understand it, irrespective of color, caste, or creed. All, irrespective of position in life. Whether you're a professional man, a businessman, a laborer, makes no difference. No matter what your position is, God is there. He is available to everybody. He is knowable and realizable by everyone, irrespective of their position or station in life. That's the wonderful part of God. That's making God the God He should be, not a God of partiality. It isn't fair to have someone go to heaven and someone not, just because they did this in this life and did that. God isn't that way. He says, "This is my dream. Enjoy it, but don't be wrapped up in it. But you can come to me anytime you want to and be free from it." That's a wonderful concept. That is true. And there are many who meditate regularly who do that every day. They get out of the dream into the reality, the presence of God. And so all, remember, all can rise above this outward form of existence, and all can realize the presence of God within them. As the great beam coming in through the medulla center, the great beam of God's light, which has made us and sustains us, but in that beam is everything. Everything you can imagine. Now everybody can realize that, everybody can see it, if they look for the presence of the Holy Ghost in the right way. Self-realization will give you those techniques. Now, in Corinthians we read this. What? "Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which ye have of God, and ye are not your own?" We don't belong to anybody. Mary DeMarcia said, we belong to God. We are manifestations of Him. Our consciousness is His consciousness. Why not claim it? Why go through all this suffering and all this trouble when all we have to do is empty out everything and sincerely say, "God, here I am." But it must be sincerely and it must be completely. That's why every great saint says, no matter how much yoga you practice, it must be followed by full surrender to God. There cannot be any restrictions. There cannot be any reservations, because God knows as He's made us. But when we throw everything away and say, "Father, here I am. I don't care what I've been. But here I am, I want you and you only. When you reach that state of consciousness, then his bliss will come without question of a doubt. God is. We must have him. That's one God, and that's one religion. Realize that. And so, this is within each and every one of us, the presence of God. The single eye at this point, the star of the east, star of Bethlehem, the eye of intuition, the dove descending from heaven is right here. That's the witness of the presence of God within each and every one of us. Having that, we can have him. Because Master has said, there is no question of a doubt, bliss consciousness is God consciousness. Now that's the way to make and realize one God and one religion. Finally, if we find, by looking at the spiritual eye, that bliss of God's presence, we feel his presence, everybody can do it because each one is made in the image of God. Having that, having the realization of God's presence, oneness with him, all our troubles and disappointments melt in his great presence because God is love. God is love. The feeling aspect of God is love. Satchitananda, ever-conscious, blissful, eternal existence. That's what we want. You say, oh, I want this, I want that. No, you don't. You want that which the saints have said throughout the ages. God alone, ever-conscious, blissful, eternal existence. And that's what we can have if we will follow those who have had it, like our beloved Master and the other saints. If you follow them and follow what they have told us to do, we too will realize the presence of God as ever-conscious, blissful, eternal existence under every condition, not just today and tomorrow, but always. Not under this condition and not under that condition, always. Under any condition, even the greatest sorrow, God must be able to be there with us, otherwise he's not universally necessary. Now only his power can give us that, because there is sorrow in the world. We see it all the time. It seems that we cannot rise above it. By the grace of God's power you can. There is no condition that will come wherein you cannot go to your Father and be lifted up and be free from the effects of that condition. Therefore, God is ever-conscious, blissful, eternal existence. Have that. Know that. Make that your own, and you will realize one God and one religion.